All right, rock and roll. All right. Hi there, everyone, and welcome back to Conversations with the Curator, your monthly behind the scenes look into our collections and our exhibits here at NCHGS. We have a whole lot to cover today, so let's just swing straight on into it. Today's conversation highlights what is, in my humble opinion, one of the most significant collections that we have. And while you may not know his name, you'll certainly recognize the events that he covered. And blatant warning for our viewers, whether you are tuning in live or you're watching this on YouTube, we're going to be covering Nazi war crimes trials. So if that is not your thing, we completely understand. Full disclosure as well that our two backgrounds are in social history and in art history. We are not legal scholars. Not that this is an easy subject for legal scholars either.
No,
And
certainly.
yes, and I am not a German speaker. I know you have a little background in it.
Enough that it's not even there.
Oh, you was more than me.
Yeah.
So please excuse any of our inaccuracies and our bumbling. This was quite a hefty one to try to get into. So let's start just with the basics and some background on our man himself.
Sure.
Who is Ted? Who is Ted Pierce, and what led him to Southeast Germany in 1945?
So Ted Pierce was a radio broadcaster and had been for much of his life. He's born in Clinton, New Jersey, which for me is an interesting. My first museum job was in Clinton, so it's an interesting
Full circle.
interesting full circle
Yeah.
moment. He started reporting radio sports broadcasting in 1939 with Radio Station West here in Easton. The story goes that he skipped class and started coming to do the radio, which I love that. So he ends up in the army. He enlists in, and of course here I'm crunching a lot of Ted's life in a small sort of moment. How he wants us to try to do split screen.
Oh. Oh, like the grid?
Oh,
So
so
we not using the owl today. So where the past couple of times you would have seen two of us side by side and then one bar on the top, we are trying to see if the computers give us a little better of a picture quality.
we're trying. We continue to evolve.
Yeah, we'll see if we'll
Yeah.
see how the recording turns out. We'll see if it helps.
Yeah. So Ted joins the army in 43. He goes to basic training in Fort McClellan, Alabama. He enlists in Fort Dix. While he is there, he is working in the public relations department of the army at Fort Meade, where he is working as doing public address systems, like addressing the fort, right?
Okay,
And
okay.
kind of base communications. In that time, he's promoted 3 times in 90 days from private to sergeant. He then moves overseas to the European Theater of the War, where he is part of the Information and Education Department. In that, he is doing lecturing, he is doing newscasting, and he is planning orientation displays. He receives particular note for a lecture he gives on the history of the war in the Pacific. He, at that point as well, becomes involved in American Forces Radio Network, which is a radio network for the troops. He is first in Paris and then he's in Frankfurt after VE Day. At that point, he is doing sports broadcasting for the radio there. He is also broadcasting particular, events that are happening during the war. He broadcasts the funeral of George Patton. Interestingly, I saw this as an aside and just wanted to mention kind of the weirdness of radio, I guess, because of there was a bit of a scheduling issue that I saw. And the Patton funeral happened before the radio broadcast was scheduled to happen. And Pierce was there for the Patton funeral, but then gave a kind of shouldn't say play-by-play for a funeral, but a live broadcast of the Patton funeral post it occurring. which is I'm fascinated by that.
That's kind of a skill.
Exactly. So he broadcast the Patton funeral. He will then end up broadcasting Nuremberg, which we'll talk about extensively.
Right.
Just kind of an additional side here because I pulled it because I think it's particularly noteworthy. Ted, during the war, after the war, and kind of for his career, was very involved in philanthropy, local philanthropy, particularly through raising money through the radio station. So a couple things I pulled here that he was doing annual fund drives for the Infantile Paralysis Foundation, which would later become the March of Dimes. This was, of course, connected to pre-polio vaccine with children who were paralyzed because they had contracted polio. He and the people who are listening to him on the radio raised $45,000 over 3 days to build a Quonset hut for polio patients and to purchase iron lungs in 1949. He and his listeners contributed $5,000 to finance an Easton team for the East Penn Baseball League, which I don't know anything about baseball, so that is very much not a history thing for me. In 1955, so 70 years ago, he and the station personally broadcast day and night for 3 days during the devastation of Hurricane Diane. Kind of really providing this vital day-to-day account of news during this really horrific event that was Hurricane Diane. Right. So he is, and I put this in particular
on top of everything else.
On top of everything, he is helping raise money for the first Easton Heritage Day.
No, get out.
In 1978. The square is a circle.
Wow.
Yeah. So
we really do come full circle.
So philanthropy extensively involved during, a longtime local radio personality. And in the case of our discussion here, reporting at one of the most significant legal events of the 20th century.
Arguably so.
The first Nuremberg trial.
Yes. Cindy mentioned that you are speaking, but it shows your microphone muted icon. We are using the microphone off of my computer because since we're sitting literally right across from each other, 4 feet, if there was way too much of a feedback between the two of our microphones. So again, we're just seeing if this works.
We're seeing it. We'll see how we feel.
We might move back to Al next month after all this.
Yeah.
So Ted is quite the dude.
Ted is quite the
dude. And it only gets, I know chronologically that wouldn't make any sense. Sorry, ignore that bit.
Right. And so it's like maybe then a note on Nuremberg, and then we can kind of go on to that, right? So like his involvement in Nuremberg. So he is broadcasting daily what was happening at the Nuremberg, the first Nuremberg trial, right? Nightly broadcasts. He is he's the only correspondent at Nuremberg who secures an exclusive interview with Chief Justice Robert H. Jackson. That was broadcast on American Forces Network in Europe and then in the United States and then on CBS Radio.
Huh.
Yeah.
Wow. So let's talk about like the context of Nuremberg itself, because it is certainly not my strong point. So I had to kind of do a deep dive into.
I have a new. Sorry to interrupt audio.
Yeah. Oh yes.
Mute your computer.
Okay.
That should solve your audio.
Well, no, you're echoing on my audio.
That should solve the problem. Oh.
Yeah, no, now there's a big echo.
Do that.
What?
Okay. That should solve the problem. That's
I don't know what you just did,
no, there
but
wasn't,
okay.
because it was the problem was really that because
Okay.
my microphone wasn't working, you were always on speaker view.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Let's
We
let's just go back to Al next time.
okay.
This is
I think yeah, I'm pro going back to
okay.
okay. Anyway,
Anyway, Nuremberg,
Nuremberg.
guys.
So
Yeah.
he does that kind of exclusive interview with Chief Justice Robert
Mm,
H. Jackson. He is we'll talk about kind of what these things are, but what is in
mm,
our collection are the broadcast scripts from
mm,
January 1946.
mm, mm.
So that's what we have.
Yes. And the trial that he was reporting on is the big one that everyone seems to associate with Nuremberg, even though there were 20 plus after that. That was the International Military Tribunal, which I'm just going to shorten to IMT because I'm going to start stumbling over my words. What was the IMT and why was holding it at Nuremberg so symbolic?
Sure. So the IMT, the International Military Tribunal, was formed by the Allied powers, kind of World War II, right? So that would be the United States, Great Britain, France, and the Soviet Union. This was partly the result of the October 1943 Moscow Declaration of German atrocities. Can you tell I went down a World War II legal rabbit hole here?
Yes.
And what that was an Allied agreement that these Germans who were responsible for atrocities during the war would be tried for those in the country where those were committed. So the IMT was a international military tribunal that was organized by those Allied powers. So ultimately, what it was the prosecution. In the case of what we're talking about, the German High Command, right? And having a trial on an international basis, right?
Right.
So ultimately, it was occurring in Nuremberg, right? But they were being tried by the Allied powers who won the war and ultimately humanity, right? So this is the people who are being brought to Nuremberg. It is 24 defendants, 21 of whom appear in the courtroom. They are the diplomatic, economic, political, and military leadership of the Nazi regime. And they are being tried for crimes against peace, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and also conspiracy to commit those, right? That is the first time in a legal sense this kind of definition of what we now understand as crimes against humanity is used in a legal framework. And it is also the first time the indictment uses a new legal term, which is genocide. So it is long reaching in its scope, right? It is the implications are heavy, right? And it is ultimately a international legal reckoning of the atrocities of the German Reich. Right. And having it in Nuremberg, right? Like there were practical reasons to have it in Nuremberg, right? There was a jail. There was there was a jail and a place to have the trial that were in close proximity to each other. Okay. It was in American occupied, the American occupied section, right? So it was there were a variety of reasons that made Nuremberg practically good, but symbolically, Nuremberg was the symbolic center of Nazi myth making. Okay. Right. So it's when you think of Nazi, during the war rallies, right? If you think of the rallies that are in Leni Riefenstahl's The Triumph of the Will, right? The propaganda film is ultimately this kind of intense visual look at what Nazi propaganda was. That's at Nuremberg, right? That is the kind of the place where this myth of Nazi nation crystallized.
Right.
Right. And like I think what is very important for that, right? And I was kind of like looking at like Nuremberg and kind of what was happening at Nuremberg. Goebbels, the minister for propaganda, said, not to like quote Goebbels, but this is I think vitally important
for historical context
for why
important.
Nuremberg, right? He said like what was happening at these rallies, what was happening at Nuremberg was, quote, was a place where the participant changed from, quote, a little worm into part of a large dragon, right? So it's like this idea of this like myth making and aggrandizement of Hitler, of the Nazi high command, but I mean like really around the person of Hitler, and then of the idea of that German Aryan nation, right? So that kind of really like the myth making, the like almost, well, I mean, like religious fervor of it is at Nuremberg. So the prosecution of Nazi war crimes at Nuremberg is a refutation of that, right? It is a reckoning of what the implications of the Nuremberg rallies were, right? So I think it's like both practically significant and symbolically significant that it would be there, right?
From the historian's perspective, and I feel like we really have what's the word that I want? Boy, this is harder than I thought. It's not every day we talk about Nuremberg. I guess the hindsight in a horrifying way, like this is fascinating, as I think any reasonable person would feel horrifying, but in like a fascinating way.
Of course, yeah.
From an evidentiary standpoint, because none of this had been taken up on that scale before. Like we got the word genocide out of this. Like that's significant. So as they are gathering evidence from multiple countries in multiple languages regarding completely new indictments, how do historians work with that kind of evidence? Like, how does that kind of documentation help us have a more complex and deeper understanding of subject matter? I guess like on a massive scale.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's, if we're thinking of the like sheer plurality of evidence, right? Like it's a sheer plurality of evidence that Nazi war crimes occurred, right? Like just kind of at a basic level. It's like incontrovertible, right? But like partly also what it is, and I think an element of this, and I'll see if I can kind of like articulate it the way I'm thinking it. It's like that large amount of material, that prosecuting of new crime, that Ted Pierce broadcasting daily what's happening at Nuremberg, right? Like that is almost places it within the modernity in which it occurred, right? Because it's like like atrocities had happened historically before, right? But like the scale of the Holocaust and Nazi atrocities in general was in a way tied to the bureaucracy of modernity, right? It was the trains, it was the paperwork, it was the minister for propaganda, it was all of these vast cogs, right? It, like in a way, the Nazi regime was a modern regime, right? Even though they're evoking this ancient Aryan past and ancient Rome in weird ways too. But like that plurality of evidence from all over, produced by people all over, talking about all of these things and the movement of people and the like creation of these bureaucratic systems, right? Like as a historian, that shows us what this means in the modern era, right? And that how like people had been capable of evil historically, but like modernity doesn't separate you from that evil, right? Like
Right.
it can, like the tools of modernity are also tools of evil
Right.
in a way, right? But it, and it, because so I think it like shows you the broad, like the broadness and realness of it, right?
Right.
And the kind of the scope of it and the kind of like sheer, like almost bafflingly largeness
Right.
of it, right? But
Right.
it's also this kind of the documentation is so vast that you can see it happening in real time,
Right.
right? And it's like, as a historian, it's like I don't work with World War II or
Yeah.
the
Yeah. Yeah.
Holocaust or anything like this, but it's like this is vitally important, right? Like this is vitally important for humanity
Yes.
that we know this, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like vitally important.
Right. And I mean, we'll get to it in a little bit, but fascinating to me that Ted wonders okay, what year it was. I'm not gonna get ahead of myself, but he is thinking of the future as he is reporting as
Mhm.
well. I was like, yeah, this seems like a very Ted thing to do and a very human thing to do.
Agreed. Yeah.
So let's get into some of Ted's commentary because it's just like it's so poignant. So although at the IMT they tried 22, I believe, high-ranking Nazis in total, Ted took a particular interest in Hermann Goering and Rudolf Hess, especially in how they were behaving during the trial. So he was less concerned about like the prosecution's argument, which he would cover, but he's focusing on like facial expressions and body languages and gestures. And his commentary is just so sharp and witty sometimes. Like as he is watching Goering listening to the evidence, and he calls him at one point like a vast hunk of humanity.
Right.
And
I think there's a point where he talks about his
yeah,
like hands, like his corpulent fingers too.
who was it? It wasn't Goering that he called it, but he called someone like most noticeably bald. It was like, oh Ted, oh Ted.
Yeah.
Um, but why is that important? Like, I mean, I'm fascinated by it from a social perspective, but
And so like I think it's so I think the answer in part is it's like particularly really good reporting, right? Because it's like he does it like the one that always sticks out to me is like where he's talking about like where and I'll get it wrong because I'm not like directly quoting it, but like where the prosecution is like something is insinuated that Goering is like the number three Nazi. And he's like, oh no, I'm not the number three Nazi. I'm the second Nazi. Like
okay.
I am only a step below. Right. So it's like this kind of like really almost like baffling, like
Yeah.
you know, like what's going on here kind of thing, right? But it's like it's fantastic reporting because he puts you in the he puts you in the room as it's happening, right? You're seeing these people as they're going, you know, like as they're being tried, you're seeing their reactions, and it's like he gives you this very I think they're caricatured in a way, but also very human accounts of these humans who are sitting in the dock at Nuremberg, right? But I think that's also that he is doing that is also vitally important, right? Because it's like that the banality of evil thing, right? Because like which is the Hannah Arendt famously about the Eichmann trial, right? That we can very easily say that people like Goering and Eichmann and Hess are monstrous aberrations and they are evil people that did evil things, right? And yes, they did evil things. The things they did were horrible, right? But like it is vitally important to note that they're humans who are doing these things, right? And there's kind of that like the banality of evil is a lot about like this kind of like cog in the mechanism of totalitarianism, right? And you can be like a bureaucrat at a desk and you can still be doing evil, right? Like you don't have to be doing the evil yourself. You know, like by evil, I mean like murdering people. You by signing papers, you are doing that, right?
Correct.
But like it's important. Like that kind of commentary is very important because it's like that it's very important to think of Goering as human, right? Because like he a recurrent thread of like, people in the past were human like us, right? Like Goering was human, and as were the other people in that he was being tried with that did really awful things.
Right. And like I'm typing out notes as I speak, but thinking about, these are men who basically signed death warrants for how many uncountable millions of people. And then they go home at night and play with their kids and listen to the opera.
Yeah.
There is no, they're not at the dinner table debating the morality of their choices.
Right.
Right. And Ted just happens to point that out in a humorous way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And in a way, is that not just kind of like, I couldn't imagine sitting in that courtroom and trying to make myself almost detach from it to keep my own sanity.
Right. Yeah. I think you kind of would have to.
I think you have to.
Because I think it would be overwhelming.
How do you cope with that?
I have no idea.
Right.
Right. But it's like, I think that's almost like, as he's reporting it, and like when you're thinking about it in that way, it makes it even more chilling.
Right.
I think, right? Because it is this, it's an indictment of things that humanity's capable of, right? Which is ultimately, I mean, like that's what Nuremberg's about.
Right. And it's so easy for us, I think, to say, or to think what we would have done in that situation, but also all the things that we know, like the evidence that we know that they brought forth at Nuremberg. I'm sure Ted wasn't sitting there and expecting to see footage from mass extermination camps. Right. And it's again, it's easy for us to sit here behind our computers, two people in the field of history, and say, this is what I would have done. Well, you don't know that. I don't know.
Yeah. But I think like that he is there reporting on it, like that's like vitally important, right? Like that's being talked about.
And there's a weird kind of, I know a lot of things in this discussion come full circle, but as Ted is talking about just how like boringly ordinary these men are. I mean, Ted wasn't certainly boring or ordinary, but he was just like, what are the odds that some radio announcer from Easton, from here, who lived 2 miles up the hill,
is it Nuremberg?
It's at Nuremberg.
Yeah.
Ted's just a fascinating dude, an amazing dude, but a dude. Like, yeah.
It's the kind of, I think it's that regular people in the context of the extraordinary in a way, which is
that'll be our tagline for this
thing we talk about all the time. Really. but yeah, I mean, I think it is, I mean, in a way, that's what is so compelling about them, I think, because it is really like he's definitely like there, he is having his posting with the Armed Forces Network, right? He is reporting so that the troops and then like everyone else knows like what's going on in Nuremberg, right? But it is this like, it is ultimately like, and it's like the other people there were regular people too,
right?
And it's like ultimately like his description of Nazi high command is them as regular people, and also then like beggars the reality that like the people that they condemned to concentration camps and death were regular people too, right? So it's like this very human story of regular people.
Right. Yeah. Right. And like I know we hadn't really talked about this, but Ted had changed the spelling of his last name from Pierz to Pierce because his father was from Poland.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, just I can't imagine maybe the shock that he felt as he is just reporting on the everyday things happening in 1945, and somebody approaches him and says, "Hey Ted, you want to cover a war crimes trial?" And he's like, "A what now?"
Right. Like, because that's the thing. I mean, that's like it's so much of like what because it's like I've gotten you're not like as a museum person supposed to say like this is the significant thing in our collection.
Right.
Like they're all
everything is significant.
Everything's significant.
However,
but like the the Nuremberg transcripts are extraordinary.
Right.
Right? They're powerful. They are like history happening day by day. Like you can see, I mean, at least through January, right? You can see like as the kind of rhythms of the trial are happening and kind of different people are being brought in, right? And it's just kind of this like the creation of like a case for the prosecution of this, right? So it's like, yeah.
There's a point where I think I kind of skipped over it in my own notes. But he mentions like as the trial is going on, that it was Hess, I think, that had faked amnesia for the bulk of the trial. And then, sorry, I'm not looking at you or the camera because I'm reading off my notes. But that he wrote, quote, he played amnesia until the end when he realized that his defense wasn't holding up, and then he cracked. And how all but two lost their confidence in the end in their defense.
Right.
And as I scroll back down to where I was going with this story, seeing history being made in real time, like I know a lot of times we can't conceptualize the impact of a moment when we are in the moment.
Right.
But some of the tiny things that we can pick up on later, like as I was reading through all these documents, there was a point where he changes typewriters. Like you can see that the type gets smaller.
Right. Yeah.
And that's just fascinating to me because I can just imagine harried Ted in this newsroom going like, just give me another typewriter. I don't have time for this.
Right.
And just grabbing something else and keep
Well,
going.
they're all like, there's misspellings.
Yeah,
There's like,
yeah.
there's errors.
Busy man.
Yeah, they're just like, yeah, they're amazing in their immediacy, right?
Yeah.
And I think like very often you can see like there's a lot of documents historically where you can see like immediacy and you can see like the people are writing letters and they're scratching things out and they're changing stuff. And
Paging Robert Levers.
yeah, exactly. He's always kind of writing stuff in margins, right? But like you can see him just like getting it out. And of course it's like in this, they're all daily, I'd say they're all like a page and a half.
Yeah.
Right. So they're short because they're meant to be read as a blurb on the radio about what happened. But they show us this like immediacy as it's like a daily immediacy of it occurring, right? You can tell you do get a sense when you're looking at them like that they're off of his like notes he would have been taking while he's there, right? So they're very they just feel very present in a way, right? And like they feel like they're from that. I mean, they're obviously from that moment, but they're you can tell when he writes the one, he has no idea what's going to happen the next day, right?
Yeah.
So there is this like real sense of history as it is occurring. Right. And it's like hard to, and it's like, I think it would be like, you know, he's kind of like doing his job and reporting it, right? But it's like, I think it would be like, if you were reporting Nuremberg or like writing these things, it's both this like, you know, it's a massive deal, right? But it's like, can you fully conceptualize the kind of like, broader implications of Nuremberg and like the post-Nuremberg world, right? Like, I'm not sure of that, right? So it's like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. But, and I think for someone like Ted who was constantly thinking and like writing in his head, he's probably immediately like, I don't have time to deal with like the implications of this right now. I have to get this report out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So from a conservation perspective, from a museum collections perspective, how do you treat these original original in a sense? I mean, first, let's start with, would you consider these primary documents?
Absolutely. Yeah, these are primary documents. And they are we call them, they're kind of broadly called in the collection, right? Like the transcripts, right? But they're not transcripts, they're I don't think they're transcripts. I think they're his reading script, right? Because if they were transcripts, they would have less of that less of his correction. Like the spelling might be better, right? But they're like the things he's reading from when he goes on the radio. Right. So I mean, like, if that ain't a primary source, I don't know what's a primary source, right? Because it's like an eyewitness account of ultimately a regular guy at Nuremberg, right? It's an astonishing primary document. So it is this like, I think they provide this kind of deeper look at what that would be like, right? And it's like kind of even like looking into like Nuremberg as I had for to prep for this a little bit. It's like Ted's voice is a voice that's not part of like the broader like accounts like that you can readily find, right? So it's like it provides this kind of alternative perspective, and there's like a lot. There's like nothing he says in there that's like counter to like what other people are saying, right? There's not like there's kind of a consensus of what occurred, but they are really showing one person processing it and making it available for people to know about, right? So it's like they're an eyewitness account.
Yep.
They're astonishing.
Yeah. I was gonna say fitting point to end on, but then I just thought of something after that too. But this is where I was going earlier. So in an interview very shortly after, I'm gonna say this knowing full well that I have to edit this on YouTube, but shortly after Hess's suicide in prison in 1987, Ted is interviewed in, I want to say it's the Express, but don't like quote me for sure on that.
It's the Express too.
Okay. He's reflecting on the legacy of the IMT and how he felt fortunate to be picked or chosen to go and report on it. I think that really just drives it. Like, I know this has been a theme for the past couple of our conversations, but the impact that one local citizen can have, even if it's something that you didn't initially think that you were going to choose to do, or something that you didn't think that you were going to be thrust into this momentous moment. What does that mean for, like, I know we're in a certain category as historians. What does that mean for historians? But what does that mean for just anyone viewing this live or on YouTube?
I think it's that we are all of us Asian slip, but we are all, I'm using like use historical jargon. We are people who experience history, right? Like we are all of us people that are experiencing our lives and thus experience historical events.
It happens every day, in fact.
It happens every day. And it's like, this is, I think, a purposeful theme of ours, but a theme of ours in that a lot of the historical people we do talk about are regular people that, in the case of some, end up in extraordinary situations, right? Like the Connolly brothers, regular people that seem very alive, writing during the Civil War. These momentous events during the Civil War, they seem like just regular dudes, right?
Two brothers that missed their mom.
Their mom and wanted their packages. Ted Pierce,
valid,
like a regular guy, right? So it's like, I think, and like, of course, like, this has long been a part of history, but I think like an important thing we do, and an important thing like historians try to do now, it's to talk about the voices of people who aren't like the big names, right? So it's like, where like Ted and the Connolly brothers are interesting is they are regular people whose paths intersect with big names, right? But it's like, what they show us, it's that like regular people experience things, and they're just like, of course regular people experience things, but like the voices of regular people historically are also exceptionally significant, right? And I think like in the case of like someone like Ted, right, like reporting in Nuremberg, it's like that for us, that's vitally important, because like there are very few people who are alive that were adults or in the army, in like the armed forces or anything, that were there, right? So it's like,
much less in Nuremberg,
but much less there. And it's like, those voices are going, right? And it's like, we are losing that kind of very important connection to that very pivotal event.
Mhm.
The ultimately like, World War II shaped the modern world.
Right. Oh, yeah, no question.
So for many ways, right? So it's like we're losing those
Right.
voices. And I think like someone like Ted does remind us of that,
Mhm.
right? That it's like there are very few eyewitnesses to World War II
Mhm.
left,
Mhm.
right? That can like tell us what was happening, like
Mhm.
as they're liberating concentration camps or like in the Pacific or like the Blitz. You know, it's like
Right. Well, didn't
those
the last I can't remember his last name, Ben, his last name begins with an F. One of the last Nuremberg prosecutors just died in what, 20?
I think so.
22?
Yeah,
Something,
I
yeah.
believe so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
very important.
Yeah.
Because I mean, World War II is not that we're at the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II this year.
Yes. In fact, that's why I did this in
Right. So
in May.
in May. So like, yeah, I mean that's in the grand scope of history, that's not long ago. But
No,
it's vitally
really not.
significant. And it's like as a like spoiler, I suppose, like
Mhm.
I've one of the reasons I think we're talking about this, other than that it's very important,
Mhm.
is I'm planning on featuring where our upcoming exhibit, Read This, the History of Media in Northampton County,
Yes.
is about the power of information,
Mhm.
misinformation, and disinformation
Mhm.
during the American Revolution
Mhm.
and connecting it to the present day.
Right.
But I'm planning on including at least some of
Mhm.
the Pierce Nuremberg transcripts, right? Because it's like there is power in the ability to record and say these sorts of
Mhm.
things, right? And like it is vitally important to like have a free press that continues to report on these things, right?
Indeed.
So like that is kind of the crux of it, right? So it's like I think it's like they're very important.
Mhm.
Very, very important.
Yeah. Yeah. And just to, I know we didn't show slides or anything, but we do have a quite a good stack of these documents that are on display in the War and Conflict exhibit. I'm
Yeah,
pointing
they're
like you
they're
can,
on, they're on view now.
yeah. That's on the first floor gallery. There are also other copies that are up in our archives. And Read This opens in September.
September.
September. Boy, that's coming too.
It is.
Um, do we have any questions from anyone before we wrap up? Ooh, lively chat, lively chat. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, Ted worked for Radio Station West, and that was up on College Hill, I believe.
I believe so.
Okay. Okay, I am gonna read Cindy's comment. Thank you, Cindy. I think it speaks to the importance of moving beyond our virtual understanding on our computers. Actually visiting the locations gives us a better understanding of the events and the proximity of the locations. It is sometimes hard to understand when so many can say that they did not know the events that were happening.
Yeah,
Boom, Cindy.
absolutely, Cindy.
Yeah, damn, that's a good one. Howie says, has any thought been given to having these published as a journal?
I don't know.
Can we do that?
I will say, Howie, kind of a half answer to your question. It's my plan to have them on display and Read This, and to have a way that people will be able to read them.
Oh, okay.
That. So
Cool. Okay. Yeah, I don't know
I
if
don't know. That wouldn't know if that count as publishing, but it
I
would
don't
be
know.
a kind of broader availability of them more
Right.
so than now.
Right. I'm not sure like the legal implications of like who still has intellectual property to them. Did he have children? I don't know. If
I
they
think
still anyway.
that's yeah.
Anyway. Not my forte. Um oh, here we go. Here we go. Do you have recordings of Ted's interview with Jackson, or do you know where they may be?
We do not.
Oh,
I've been
ooh.
trying to find recordings of that and others. So watch this space, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, While the physical locations are important, the interpretation of contemporaries is just as important for context and understanding. I think that is partially why we do what we do.
Yeah.
As historians in general, and us sitting across the table from each other, chit-chatting about Nuremberg.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, guys, my chat box is really small. Okay. All right. I appreciate you offering today's meeting. We appreciate you, Cindy.
We always do
Yes.
appreciate it.
It lets us know that we are witnesses of history, and it is not until the future we will know how significant the events are that we witness. Ted thought the exact same thing.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's why we're here, really. That's why we spend decades in school.
Oh, that's a good. I'm seeing the chat now too, and at a
Okay.
weird moment, I too can see the chat.
Oh, hey, there you go.
how was the reporting decimated at the time? Were any of the reports syndicated?
Ooh.
They were on American Forces Network, and then they were made available in the United States. In the case of the one I know particularly the best about how it was distributed was was the interview with Justice Jackson, which was and that would kind of give you an idea of kind of what that would look like. It was broadcast in Europe, then broadcast in the United States, and then syndicated on CBS. So I think we're seeing like kind of like a funneling of information. A thing I also had seen about the radio broadcasting at Nuremberg is it was originally supposed to be closed. Like there was going to be radio for like enlisted people, but then it was made available for the public.
I just had a wild thought. I'm pretty sure I posted a photo of them not too long ago. So I'm gonna see if I can post that up and oh, there we go. Here's one. Unfortunately, it has my hand in the picture, but Lord, computers are great when they're not achingly slow. Okay, how do I share my own screen? Hey, there we go. Oh, look at that. That actually worked really well. Okay, so I just pulled this from our Facebook. But this is January 17th, 1946. So they are, I would say, in relatively good condition.
They're in excellent shape. Yeah.
I mean, you can feel that the paper is, 80-year-old paper, but just so you guys can kind of see what we are working with. And there's a pretty hefty stack of them as well.
Someone even took the staples out, which is good archival practice.
Hey, kind of wonder who that was. Yeah. All right. Well, there's a little teaser for you. Guess you have to come into the museum to see the rest of them. If you are not able to, I'll include some more photos as well. And when I get this up on YouTube and then I add it to our social medias, I'll include some other photos as well. Actually, fun fact, cotton gloves in the archives are no longer considered standard practice, if I'm correct.
Especially with paper. Yeah. The best way to interact with paper is with clean hands. Clean naked hands.
Wait, what now?
Because it gives you better tactility.
Okay.
Broadly, if we're interacting with objects, we use latex or nitrile gloves. Like the kind that a surgeon would use. Because they also give you a little more tactility than a cotton glove.
Said from someone who works with the objects and who works with the front desk.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Hey, you learn something every day because I was in college and we were still using cotton gloves. So and then I first came here and I was like, what are y'all doing? And I learned right quick.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So we are gonna wrap in at just under an hour. Tried to keep the war crimes chat to
an hour.
Yeah. I'm going to be frank with you. I don't know how to end this. How do you end?
Next month?
Next month is the Treaty of Easton, which is cool. So if we can finagle the owl and the table, maybe we can sit right
be among
next
the
to.
Treaty of Easton. That's my plan, yeah.
Cool. Actually, if the owl has that
We'll
panorama,
figure it out.
yeah,
Yeah,
cool. Okay, so stay tuned. This is not to say everything is one of my favorite objects, but
it's a good one.
pretty significant.
Really good.
Pretty
We're
significant.
getting two significant ones to get the summer.
Yeah, rock and roll. All right, so my plan is to get this up on YouTube within the next couple of weeks. I will post to Instagram and social media when I have this up, and because we have to save this for the algorithm, but it gets more satisfying every time we do it. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe and click, is there still a notification bell? I don't know. I'm I'm very elder millennial when it comes to this. All right. So we'll see you guys next month and we'll let you know when this is up.
And one of the best ways you can support us and our organization is by becoming a member.
Become a member. There are so many benefits to joining us as a member of NCHGS. You get free admission to the museum for just browsing the exhibits and most programs that we do. You can also sponsor a program such as this one. You can sponsor the conservation of an artifact such as the Ted Pierce transcripts. What am I missing? All around, we're just some cool folks, so you should come and hang out with us.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Super nerdy way to end that. All right, guys, we'll see you next month.
Bye, everyone.
Take care, everyone.